So we're here to talk about young people's engagement with literature, and this is what it looks like in the wild. If you go out into any wooded area or grassy area, you'll find young people reading books together. And as reading researchers, we try to study these creatures in their native habitats. And we come up with lots of concepts to help us hone our research. Two of the key ones that we're going to be talking about are motivation and engagement. And motivation and engagement are really squishy, weird concepts because they're very difficult to measure. But as we're going to talk about, they are essential to the process of people reading and writing.
So there is such a thing as summer reading setback. When kids are not reading in the summer, they can lose all of the gains in reading achievement that they've made all school year long. So one of the things that I do in my research is I try to run summer reading programs. This one was one I ran at the local Boys and Girls Club, where I pair pre-service teachers, beginning teachers, and reading specialists with young people who want to read. I established the context for the summer reading programs around what we know motivate young people to read when they get opportunities to choose what they read. They need time to read, access to books they want to read, opportunities to choose those books, and opportunities to talk about what they're reading. Kids want to talk about what they're reading when they get opportunities to do that. What do they want to read? They want to read series books. Think about the Hunger Games, books 1, 2, and 3, books like Divergent. The Amulet graphic novel series was really popular at the Boys and Girls Club. There's about 10, 11, 12 books in that series. The Dork Diaries series, about 13 books there. So what happens when I put teachers who come in with lots of assumptions about young people and what young people should be reading? What happens when they get paired with young people and have to read what young people want to read? Well, a lot of stuff falls down and a lot of disruption happens. And some of those disruptions are around, for example, one teacher said middle grade students will not understand some of the higher thinking skills necessary to access certain books. And he was kind of poo-poohing the fact that his book buddy wanted to read the Dork Diaries, but actually found out that the young reader who wanted to read this book had very sophisticated ideas about theme, about character development, and was also wanting to read the book because it personally connected with some stuff that she was experiencing as a middle schooler. We also had a teacher say, well, of course he wants to read Diary of a Wimpy Kid because he just saw the movie. That's his easy way out. Well, actually, that little reader, Ralph, wanted to talk about the differences between the movie and the book, and he thought the book was a lot better. And so there was a lot of intertextuality there that he wanted to talk about that the teacher kind of poo-poohed and was surprised to see. We also had teachers who found that their book buddies wanted to read graphic novels. They had never read a graphic novel before and really were surprised to see how much comprehension, inferencing skills, and vocabulary development happened when kids read graphic novels. And then we had kids who wanted to read sports books, and the teacher said, of course they want to read sports books. They're boys and girls who play sports. But what we found out is that they had lots of reasons for wanting to read sports books. One kid wanted to be an engineer, but he wanted to read about Michael Jordan because he was so enamored by Michael Jordan's legacy and the fact that Michael Jordan did not get picked to play basketball when he was young. He had to work for that. And so we don't have to divorce reading engagement and what kids want to read from disciplinary academic literacies. They can go hand in hand for reading achievement and engagement. Thank you.
And I'm here to talk now about what Susan hasn't talked about. She talked about reading. I also want to talk about writing and what writing looks like today in some ways. There's technology involved. There's lots of different ways that people can find audiences. They're not just writing for their classmates. They're not just writing for their teachers. They find lots of different avenues for publication. My work in particular comes from my work with the Fulton Comic and Manga Club, which happens here in town. And in particular, I'm going to focus on one student who's Defo18, that's his pseudonym, and I picked him because he chose to publish his work outside of the purview of the club. His own background talking about what he was interacting with texts were he was really into superhero comics because his brother and his friends from school were really into superhero comics. He read Sonic the Hedgehog comic books because that's what he and his friends were into in terms of video games. And he and his grandfather read a lot of Peanuts. They read a lot of Sunday comics. So he got into comics early. He also got into academic problems later. So he ended up in summer school, and in particular in his worst class was math. And he had to do this computer program called Odyssey, and he was sitting there like suffering on Odyssey through the summer. And then his mind started going around. He said, Odyssey, I like Greek myths. I think of Odysseus. That's the Odyssey. That's what that's from. And he took that and that suffering and he turned it into a story called God Games, which is about a demigod who's stripped of his powers and thrown out of Olympus. And then the whole rest of the narrative is about that guy trying to get revenge on everybody who's wronged him. So what a kid in summer school would be thinking about. He didn't just stop there, though, making a comic. He started making that comic and then putting it on sites like Comic Fury and DeviantArt, which are kind of like LiveJournal or Facebook or something. He puts his art out there, and then people can give him feedback. They tell him about the story. They tell him what they like. They tell him what they don't like. And he takes that feedback, and he changes his work. At the beginning is a passage from early on in his comic, and it's still black and white, and he's messing around. And later on, he learns techniques. He's very self-taught, which I think is an interesting thing, thinking about him learning all these techniques about art, doing color, doing backgrounds. Because in reading research, we talk a lot about things that are it's very cognitive. And I put cogs here for a reason. It's like you put input in, and then output comes out, and they comprehend. And we have very set terms, and I think it comes out as very scientific and very mechanical. But if anything, our research shows is that these things that are like motivation and engagement, which are very squishy, you need those things. The cogs don't work without those two concepts. They are oiling the gears, making the things happen. People don't engage in text unless they have a reason to. So we need to pay attention to those twin things. And if there's 3 more seconds, that's 3 more seconds, but that's the end.